The ocean, vast and endless, holds many secrets beneath its surface. But on one fateful voyage, a secret so chilling was hidden. Above the waves, a secret, so terrifying that it would only be uncovered when it was far too late. Passengers boarded a seemingly ordinary cruise, eager for a peaceful journey, unaware that the ship's crew had already been dead for 3 days. How did this happen? How did hundreds of people remain oblivious to a deadly truth, lurking just beneath their feet? This is a tale of human negligence, eerie coincidence, and a terrifying mystery lost to the sea. Part 1, The Departure, a picture-perfect beginning. It was supposed to be a dream vacation, the kind of getaway everyone looks forward to. A luxury cruise across the open ocean, with promises of exotic ports, warm sunsets, and endless days at sea. The ship, the Elysian Breeze, had everything: state-of-the-art amenities, fine dining, luxurious suites, and an ever-smiling crew. For many of the passengers, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to experience the thrill of the high seas. Among the passengers were people of all walks of life, families looking to bond, honeymooners celebrating new beginnings, and solo travelers seeking peace and solitude. Everyone had their own reasons for boarding the ship, but they shared one thing in common. They were all excited for what was to come. They boarded the ship with wide eyes, hoping to leave behind their mundane lives and lose themselves in the beauty of the ocean. As the ship pulled away from the dock, the passengers marveled at the breathtaking views. The ocean stretched out to the horizon, its vastness both humbling and mesmerizing. The gentle sway of the ship brought a feeling of calm and relaxation, the kind that only the sea can offer. The crew, a well-trained group of individuals, moved through the corridors with efficiency, offering drinks, assistance, and pleasant conversation. The captain, a seasoned veteran of the seas, stood on the bridge with a reassuring smile, greeting guests and assuring them that everything was perfectly in order. But beneath the polished surface of the cruise, something was terribly wrong. The ship's crew wasn't alive, at least not in the way the passengers thought. For 3 days, the Elysian Breeze sailed across the open water without anyone noticing that the very people who should have been tending to them were no longer breathing. There were no signs of distress, no sudden crashes, no abrupt changes in course, nothing out of the ordinary. The passengers continued to eat, drink, and relax, enjoying the calm beauty of the ocean. But the truth was lurking in the shadows. Part 2, The Disquieting Silence. The First Signs. By the 3rd day, something strange began to happen. The passengers noticed a subtle shift, something they couldn't quite place, but it was there, hanging in the air like a thick fog. There was a faint sense of unease, though no one could explain why. It started with small things. The crew members, who had always been friendly and prompt in their service, began to appear slightly off. Their smiles were a little too forced, their movements a bit too rigid. They seemed distracted, as if something was bothering them, but no one could put their finger on it. It was easy to dismiss at first. Perhaps they were just tired, overworked even. After all, long hours on the open sea could take their toll. But there was something more unsettling about the way they interacted with the passengers. A few guests, particularly those who had visited the lower decks, remarked on how strangely quiet the crew quarters seemed. The hallways were unusually empty, and the sounds of laughter and chatter, which were always present in the crew's break rooms, had all but disappeared. It was then that a few passengers started to notice something else. A few crew members had started to behave oddly. They were slow to respond to requests, giving the impression of being distracted or lost in thought. At dinner, a waitress brought a plate of food to a table, but when she placed it down, she seemed to stare at it for a moment too long, as if uncertain of what to do next. A guest overheard a strange exchange between 2 crew members, one of whom was asking the other for assistance with something that should have been second nature. The request seemed off. The other crew member, instead of answering, just nodded silently before walking away, the look on his face frozen in an expression that didn't match the conversation. A faint unease began to spread among the guests, but they brushed it off. The ship was huge, and perhaps it was simply the isolation playing tricks on their minds. The ocean had a way of making people feel disoriented, like time and space didn't quite make sense anymore. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they were just tired. And these odd moments were nothing more than coincidences. But deep down, a sense of dread was beginning to take root. Something wasn't right, but no one could say what. Part 3, The Discovery, Unraveling the Truth. By the fourth day, the atmosphere on the Elysian Breeze had shifted from eerie discomfort to full-blown panic. A handful of guests had begun to make their way to the lower decks in search of answers. They noticed that the crew's cabins, normally filled with the sounds of activity, were now eerily silent. No one was around. The kitchen, usually a bustling hub of noise and motion, was completely empty. And in the mess hall, the lights flickered unexpectedly, casting an unnatural glow over the room. One guest, a seasoned traveler, decided to investigate further. He ventured down the corridor leading to the crew's quarters, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. When he reached the door to the ship's control room, he noticed something that chilled him to the bone. The door was ajar. Inside, there was no sign of life. The captain's chair, normally occupied by the experienced leader of the ship, was empty. But it wasn't just the absence of people that disturbed him. It was the strange, stale air inside the room. There was no hum of machinery, no sounds of the ship's systems running. Everything was unnervingly still. A sense of dread crept over him as he turned to leave, only to find another passenger standing behind him. This guest, a woman who had also grown increasingly suspicious of the crew's odd behavior, had followed him. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Where are they? Where is everyone?" The two exchanged a look of mutual terror before hastily retreating to the upper deck, where more passengers had begun to gather. Their concerns turned to fear as they realized they had not seen the captain or any senior crew members for hours, possibly days, and still the ship continued to sail as if nothing were amiss. No one had addressed the growing unease, and no one had reassured the passengers. The cruise had become a silent, strange procession across the open ocean. It wasn't until the following day, when a few brave passengers made their way to the medical bay, that the truth was finally uncovered. What they found there would haunt them forever. The bodies of the crew, lifeless and pale, were stacked in the small, sterile rooms of the medical bay, their faces frozen in the grim expressions of death. There was no mistaking it. They had been dead for days. And yet the ship had continued to sail, undisturbed. Part 4, The Horror of Realization, Descent into Madness. With the grisly discovery, the passengers were plunged into a nightmare of their own making. How had this happened? How had the ship continued its journey without anyone noticing that the crew was gone? The revelation left them shaken, with some barely able to comprehend the horror they had unknowingly been living through. Desperation set in. The passengers scrambled to find someone, anyone who could explain what was going on, but there was no one left to help. The ship, once a symbol of luxury and relaxation, had become a floating coffin, stranded in the middle of the ocean. Panic began to spread like wildfire. Some passengers started to argue over what should be done, while others collapsed into despair. With no experienced crew left to steer the ship or maintain order, they were at the mercy of the ocean, drifting further from civilization with every passing hour. The once vibrant ship had become a haunting monument to its own failure. Conclusion: the silent end. As the Elysian Breeze continued its silent voyage, the passengers were left to grapple with the horrific truth. How had they missed it? How had they failed to notice the signs? What had caused the crew to perish so suddenly? And why had no one noticed the strange silence that had descended upon the ship? In the end, the Elysian Breeze drifted into an unknown port, abandoned and forgotten by all who had once sailed on it. The mystery of what happened to the crew would never be solved, and the passengers, forever changed by their experience, would be left to wonder if they were truly safe, or if the ocean still held more secrets than they were willing to face. The sea, after all, has a way of hiding its darkest truths, and sometimes it takes only a single journey to uncover them, when it's already too late to turn back.